Hey and welcome to Neverwinter with Argon. So in this video I'd like to talk about your summoned companion and which should you use, an augment or an active fighter companion. Well, let's find out. This video shall primarily just be for DPSers or those of you who just want to do more damage, let's say in solo content, and you want this companion to help you out to do some more damage. Well, I'm afraid first thing I'm going to say is companions can no longer deal as much damage as they did before this combat rework. No longer will your companion carry you on your quest, where you could just pretty much rely on her to do all the damage. And yes, I'm talking about Xuna or even the chicken, the abyssal chicken. Now with this whole combat rework, companions have been changed, and they now deal a whole lot less damage, as they kind of should. And this is mainly to put into par of the balance between an augment companion, which just gives you more stats, and an active fighter companion, which will deal more damage. However, of course, there are other variations of companions that will either heal you or help defend you, etc. But that aside, these companions I'm going to talk about are the active companions that will deal specific amounts of damage, and they'll either be specialized in dealing lots of damage to multiple targets or lots of damage to a single target. So first things first, I'm going to jump to a different character so we can make a fair comparison. Here we can go and we can compare a build, which is basically a augment companion build, where I have a companion, an augment that will give me more stats and help me cap out my own statistics to give me more damage. Whereas I also have a loadout here, which is based on dealing more damage with an active companion that will do more damage specifically for me. This Lightfoot Thief, or some other such companion that will also deal damage. Now, the major difference between running with an active companion that deals damage and an augment is this. So, on this build where I want to try and maximize this thief's damage, I've went ahead and put in these Warlord inspirations. I have 3 of them, along with also having indomitable runestones there, each runestone giving 20% more damage to this companion. Now, with that being said, I'm sacrificing stats. I'm sacrificing these ratings. And this is because of these indomitable runestones. Whereas I could switch to a different runestone, and as you can see, other runestones will give you like 600 of a rating. Where all the indomitable runestone will do is give your companion 20% more damage, so you're losing those statistics. So overall you're losing 3600 stats just by having 6 indomitable runestones in your companion gear instead of some other runestone that would help you cap your stats. Along with that, also, since an active fighter companion doesn't give the bonus stats as an augment like this Alcaber Cub would, you can see it's giving me accuracy, combat advantage, and critical severity. And the statistics that it will give you on Mythic will be 2250. And giving you 3 of those stats, that totals up to 6750 stats that I'm losing out on if I were to run a companion that would deal damage for me. Now that is a total of just over 10,000 stats, and if I could get the most of these statistics, I could get up to 10% more damage maximum, that being if these caps were a lot lower. But as it stands, I'm only gaining about 5% more damage from having the stats from an augment companion, whereas with a active fighter companion, depending on how much damage it can deal, maybe it can deal more than that. Maybe it can deal overall up to 10% more of my total damage. And if it can, then it's better off to run a combat companion. And we shall see. So, testing out this Lightfoot Thief, where he goes and he attacks a target, and I make sure to give him combat advantage, and that way we can maximize how much damage he's dealing. For testing for about 5 minutes, I managed to get about 35,000 damage per second off this little guy, which is pretty decent. He was dealing there nearly 11 million damage in 5 minutes, which all things considered, that's okay. And I can go and compare multiple different companions for you guys. For example, looking at the chicken here, you can see he only dealt over 18,000 of this encounter DPS. and this is a whole lot less. But the thing with the chicken is it has a swarm ability which can do area of effect damage, so it will do a lot more damage than this when it has multiple targets. Like let's say over here with these 3 dummies, it would be able to hit every single one of them with its big powers. And that's the difference between active companions. They're going to vary in the damage they deal. However, of course, there's going to be some that specifically will deal an insane amount more damage, and you may notice this by testing it out yourself. And there will always be these companions that will slip through the cracks. They'll get some buff here or there. Cryptic Studios won't notice it, and it will do a whole lot more damage than intended. And there are still companions out there that do so. But the thing is, you guys just really shouldn't worry about it. There will always be a companion that might deal more damage than others, but these companions will be reduced and they'll get nerfed, and people will be sad about it, like with the chicken and Xuna. We all knew they were too overpowered. Maybe not too overpowered, but we all knew they were outperforming every other companion by a ton. And with that being said, Cryptic Studios knew they had to do something about it, and we knew they had to do something about it. Sure, they could have buffed up all the other companions to that level, but then what would we have? We'd have companions dealing more damage than players, and that's just silly in my opinion. Fighting companions should only deal up to a maximum of about 10% of the damage that the player does, and this should be overall encompassing all of them, especially since Augment companions will only give you enough statistics to give you about 5 or 6% of this overall damage. But this overall damage from an Augment companion is a lot more reliable, as you can always have those stats and their permanent effect, whereas something could bug out with your combat companion, whereas he could be hitting some guy off in the distance and not actually contributing to the fight in a particularly good way, and that way he may be just a setback and you might want to run with an Augment. Augments overall are just a lot more reliable, and will also make your build look a bit better by having more statistics. But again, the contribution from the statistics you gain from an Augment is only about 5%. Whereas summoned companions, when I look at how much damage they can deal, like the Black Death Scorpion is another decent one there, giving a total of about 22,000 encounter DPS, and that in fact, that number is on average quite a frequent amount of companions actually deal that. Like again, we have the Swashbuckler, who will also deal 22,000. Then we have like the Orc Wolf, deals a little bit more at 24,000. Now all of these numbers are just based on my build. It will depend entirely on what build you have, depending on how much damage they will deal. Now what I highly recommend is don't make a build surrounding the companion you want to have summoned. Make a build depending on what you have available to you, the resources you have available, and what companions you need in these power slots. After that, because you need 5 of companions here, you will need 5 more. So you may need a few companions, let's say like the Batiri, to get more damage against bosses. And then there's other such ones which would make you deal more damage against in an AoE environment. And you would get those companions, and you need a total of 10 of them. 10 of them to get this bolster to 100%, having those companions on Mythic. And it's no hurry, you can take your time. Currently on the live server, I only have a bunch of legendary companions. I haven't bothered to upgrade them to Mythic yet. Sure, I only get half the item level you would, but there's no real content which you particularly need that just yet. Sure, there is Zariel and Tower of the Mad Mage, but they can still be achievable with only legendary companions. But that aside, my emphasis on don't make a build around a summoned companion, just use a summoned companion which you have. Let's say you have a bunch of them. Go and test them out for yourselves. I highly recommend getting Combat Tracker, where you can go and specifically test out that the companions will deal on your build, and then you can compare them like I do here. After this period of time, you can see how much damage they are dealing, and you test out multiple different ones, and that way you can compare them yourself rather than relying on other people, because their damage values are all dependent on different builds. But the main things that will buff up a companion that does damage is of course those Warlord inspiration insignias, like I have over on this loadout. as you can see. And these runestones here, the indomitable ones, they actually got reduced down from 40%, now they only have a 20% buff. Still good, and they're still very well needed to make your companion actually deal significant damage, because that's a pretty huge buff there. 6 times 20 is 120%. So you're pretty much doubling their damage just by having indomitable runestones. So in my opinion, I wouldn't overly worry about a summoned companion. Choose one you like, and it's not really going to matter in the end of the day. There are of course a few which are really underperforming. They might get buffed up, but those are the ones that are really going to be overlooked. Cryptic Studios have a tendency to make sure things don't overperform, but if they underperform, they generally don't really care about it for quite some time until they get a lot of complaining and they've nothing better to do. At least that's how I feel it is. Now, with that said, that is my conclusion. Augments all around reliable just to give you more stats and more base damage always to your own powers. And a active companion are just nice to keep you company, give you combat advantage when you're soloing stuff, and also they will help you deal a little bit more damage than an augment companion, at least if you have the right companion. There are some particular companions like Suna which still do stand out as one of the best for AoE attacks, along with like the Air Archon. But I'm going to have to leave you at that. Hopefully I presented this well, and if I did, consider leaving the video a like, and if you're new around here, consider subscribing, and we'll see you guys around. Goodbye for now.